Hi, good morning to all of you. It's a really big pleasure being here. In first place, I would like to thank Federico and all his team for organizing this magnificent event, this fantastic event. Well, we are from Guatemala. I am personally from Spain, Santiago is from Guatemala, but we work at the Universidad Francisco Marroquín, which is based in Guatemala. And this year, Guatemala is celebrating its 200 years of independence. At the university, we decided to study and to explore the history of Guatemala. And for this reason, we wrote this paper. This paper, which is about agricultural development and regulatory capture in Guatemala. Basically, the basic idea of our writing is that the paper describes the privileged regime that the United Fruit Company, UFCo, enjoyed in Guatemala during the first half of the 20th century. The UFCo was able to capture decision makers, specifically the dictator of Guatemala, Manuel Estrada Cabrera, and the country's main leaders. And they captured the state to design a world to its measure. Basically, they destroyed free competition, and in some sense, they destroyed civil liberties in Guatemala. What was, or how was our process of research? Well, to develop this analysis, we tried to apply Austrian Public Choice, following Pete Boetke's methodology and Sam Foriqueda and all the people from George Mason University. And the idea is trying to study a historical process from an Austrian public choice perspective. The paper is structured in 3 blocks, 3 parts. In the first part, we describe the Austrian public choice framework. In the second part, we analyze the historical context that gave rise to the government of Manuel Estrada Cabrera, the Guatemalan dictator. And last but not least, we described the UFCo and how the company developed all their actions in Guatemala and in Central America. Who was Manuel Estrada Cabrera? The Guatemalan caudillo who gave all the power to a company. Manuel Estrada Cabrera was an authoritarian dictator who believed in centralized power. And he wanted to modernize the country. And as an advocate of modernization, for Manuel Estrada Cabrera, modernization meant infrastructure, infrastructure, and infrastructure. The president was elected in 1898 and re-elected 3 times more until 1916. He was a kind of, I don't know if you know about Latin American history, he was a kind of Porfirio Diaz, like the Mexican dictator. No? The UFCo, the company which captured the Guatemalan state, was established at the end of the 19th century and was the result of the merge of the Tropical Trading and Transport Company and the Boston Fruit Company. And the company started its operations in Central America and opened a set of relations with all the countries, with Honduras, with Nicaragua, with Guatemala, with El Salvador. But specifically in Guatemala, and based on fiscal and market access privilege, the conglomerate brought together 4 US companies: UFCo, International Railways of Central America, the Great White Fleet, and Electric Bond and Share. Together, this conglomerate of companies dominated the Guatemalan economy during the first half of the 20th century, capturing the entire state. And we saw during our research process a snowball effect, because the company was achieving a lot of privilege and a lot of political monopolies. In first place, mail transport between Guatemala and United States, but also all the privilege in the rail industry, and of course, all the privilege about telegraph and other telecommunications in that time. And what were the implications for Guatemala? If we analyze the case from the dictator perspective, from Manuel Estrada Cabrera perspective, I mean, Guatemala win a lot of things, but from a strategic point of view, the alliance between a politician, as Manuel Estrada Cabrera, and the company, UFCo, reinforce the Guatemalan government's ties with the emerging regional power, I mean, basically USA. No? From a political perspective, the alliance between the regime and the UFCo deepened Estrada Cabrera's control over the country after his re-election in 1904. It's like a win-win game. The company won and also the politician. But the thing is, between both, they capture all the state. And from an economic point of view, the alliance was functional to a regime such as Estrada Cabrera's, which was pursuing the modernization and diversification of the Guatemalan productive matrix, as well as new sources of financing following the economic crisis produced by the coffee industry due to the excess of the Brazilian production. But is there a free lunch? The benefits that the investments carried out by the UFCo brought to Guatemala in the short term are undeniable. These benefits were not free, since they represented a notable erosion of Guatemalan institutions. The company had the opportunity to capture the decision makers, and also the state. And Guatemala relinquished its freedom of expression and the possibilities to receive new investments from other companies. The UFCo, in conclusion of our paper, captured all the state and designed a Guatemala to its measure, operating under a monopoly regime, thereby limiting the opportunities for many Guatemalan workers and investors, national and international. But more importantly, we think, and we conclude our research, saying that companies like UFCo contribute to the development of a culture of privilege and of a culture of the rejection of competition in Guatemala. And both things are still alive in a country, and they serve like a wall to achieve prosperity and to achieve development in our country. It's like a cultural and a structural problem came from 19th century and the first years of the 20th century. Thank you so much, and we open to the questions with Santiago.
So, questions from your side?
Thank you. Maybe just a short question. Could you kind of integrate what you said about the historical period and this dictator, if you want to call it like that, into kind of longer run elements of Latin American, or even more specifically culture in Guatemala that might have favored these kind of developments? Or maybe there were other structures before the 19th century that were actually overthrown. So I just would be interested in the kind of longer term embedment of that. Thank you.
Yeah, well, Guatemala was living a conservative government, and it was part of the liberal party to create as Eduardo said, infrastructure. He was obsessed with infrastructure. And it was a phenomenon that was basically a Central American phenomenon. So when the United States started to build its relations with in the southern border, they found a very open will to make business with the U.S. So, of course, they started as a small company and then started growing and growing and growing. And at some point, the land that was owned by this company, the UFCo, it was a banana company, was bigger than Rhode Island. So it was basically like the 51st state of the U.S. So it was, they have the protection from the U.S. Army, and it was, as I said, Guatemala, Honduras, northern Nicaragua. So it was, yeah, it was basically in that moment that we were transitioning from a conservative government to a liberal one. Yeah, well, liberal not in a yeah, not in a libertarian sense, but understood as against conservatism. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Elections, were they relatively open, or I mean, because it went from Ireland, and in Ireland there was disastrous governments elected, but they had popular support, even though their policies were disastrous. Ultimately, was there popular support for the policies, or was it were the elections rigged?
Yeah, at the beginning, the first two elections, he had a wide popular support, but for the third and the fourth election, it was completely manipulated, and basically with the help of the U.S. Military. They even anchored a ship, a U.S. Marine ship, in the port that was also owned by the company. Just sending a very smooth message that the dictator should stay in power. So the first two were, but the second two elections were completely manipulated by the government, the company, with the support of the United States.
Some other questions? Okay. So I would like to ask you then one additional question. So if such a company has been established in the recent times, in current environment, what do you think will be the main differences in comparison to the past?
If it was...
Yeah, hypothetical situation when such a company is established now.
Right. Well, what we always say is, this is a very controversial paper in not only in Latin America, but in the United States, because we are criticizing the company from the right. This is a topic that is usually criticized from the left. But what we say is that we do like, of course, and we are open to foreign investment, and we love to have more companies. But again, companies in plural, but not in singular as it was in the past. So, if you would, we do have it right now, and there are more. But I would, put an emphasis in the plural of companies, and not only one company that can take over the state.
Okay. Thank you very much. Last chance
Thank
for
you.
any questions. We have 5 more minutes for questions, so if you have any observations or comments, you're very much welcome. Okay.
Thank you.